Today I want to talk to you about the power of sequences. A sequence is probably the simplest and most immediate form of harmonic freedom you could ever ask for. So I'm going to play you 4 examples from Booker T and the MGs, John Lennon, Kyary Pamyu Pamyu and Charli XCX, and John Coltrane. Basically what a sequence is a repetition of a little musical passage in different places. So if you were to play C, D, E, and then D, E, F sharp, and then E, F sharp, G sharp, that would be a sequence, and every step of the sequence moves up by one whole tone. So the fun thing about sequences is that you can kind of actually move them anywhere you like at any time. Because your brain obviously recognizes it as the same thing being played in different places, that sort of overrides the key and allows you to move it basically anywhere. So you can jump out of the key really quickly with no preparation, no skill, no pivot chords, no training, nothing. So the entire thing would be called a sequence, and each little bit of it is called a step. Arguably, one of the simplest forms of a sequence is the blues, where you would normally play something on the 1 chord, then the 4 chord, then the 5 chord. And it's pretty common to play the same thing on all 3 chords, at least as a vamp. Here's a little excerpt of Booker T and the MGs playing Green Onions. Listen to how more or less the same little melodic pattern moves between 3 different chords, 1, 4, and 5. So arguably this isn't even a sequence at all, but because they're playing more or less the same melodic thing in 3 different key centers, it's a good enough example to get the idea introduced. Those 3 keys are actually as closely related as any 3 keys could possibly be because they're a fifth apart. Getting slightly more complex and stepping further outside the key is John Lennon's Instant Karma. He plays a little chord progression on the 1 chord. He repeats that chord progression on the 4 chord just like we did before and like we would do in any blues. But this time, instead of stepping up a whole tone to get to the 5 chord, we're actually going to step down a whole tone to get to the flat 3. This takes us further outside the key, but because it's the same repeating chord progression that we've been hearing throughout the entire song, the strength of that is more than enough to make up for any unusual feeling that a listener might get being outside the key so suddenly.
Instant karma's gonna get you, laughing at fools like me. Who on earth do you think you are?
Right? So a little further outside the key with no preparation, but the power of that sequence is more than enough to make up for the weirdness of it. And that John Lennon song just guaranteed my copyright takedown on YouTube. So if you move by 4th or by 5th or by whole tone, you're only making small moves outside the original key. So let's go a little bit farther and do a minor 3rd leap. I'll play you an excerpt from Crazy Crazy by Charli XCX and Kyary Pamyu Pamyu. And in the post-chorus, you'll hear a little chord progression happens 2 times, and then we step up a minor 3rd and do that same chord progression, a minor 3rd higher, 2 more times.
I'm crazy, going crazy, feet all lifted off the ground. I'm crazy, going crazy, head is spinning in the clouds. I'm crazy, going crazy, feet all lifted off the ground. I'm crazy, going crazy, head is spinning in the clouds.
Right? So there's really no effort made to bridge the chord progressions in those 2 different sections. So there's a sudden change, but because you're repeating a little section of your song, your ear very quickly orients itself to the new key center. Finally, I would be remiss not to mention John Coltrane. This example should be fairly familiar to jazz nerds. In the universe, John Coltrane saw a great symmetry, like 2 sides of an equation constantly balancing each other out. Here's a vaguely satanic doodle on the circle of fifths. And to mirror this, John Coltrane allegedly searched for symmetry in music. And what he eventually ended up with were Coltrane matrices, where you divide the octave into equal parts and basically just play the same chord progression like a sequence, starting at each of the different points throughout the octave. So because there's 12 notes in an octave, you can break that into different groups. In Giant Steps, he famously broke the octave into 3 equal sections, each a major 3rd apart, and very quickly plays the same chord progression starting on each of those points. That sounds like this. So that one doesn't feel so much like a sequence as just a barrage of chords in different keys, just because it happens so fast. But in Central Park West, he does a really similar thing, but a lot slower. And this time he divides the octave into 4 equal sections, each a minor 3rd apart. That sounds like this. You can see how he's just taking the same chord progression and moving it around by minor 3rds and effectively using the power of sequence to jump between key centers really quickly. Anyway, that's how you can use the power of sequences to jump between key centers quickly and get outside regular diatonic chords quickly without really having to know too much.